Hi, this is lesson 13.3, and we are going to be evaluating trig functions of quadrantal angles. Those are angles that are 0 degrees, 90 degrees, 180, 270, or 360 degrees. So the first thing we're going to do, though, is we're going to go back and review what we did in lesson 13.2, where we had to evaluate trig functions on certain points of the unit circle. And so what we do is we draw a line, we plot the point, draw a line to it, and we'll call this point XY. We're just going to keep it generic so that it could work for any point. Then what we did is we dropped a line to the closest x-axis and made a right triangle. So this is the angle theta. This represents that angle. So then next we're going to label these sides of the triangle. So to get from here to here, that would be x, and then from here up to here, that would be your y value, whatever these numbers are. To get the hypotenuse, we use the Pythagorean theorem, a squared plus b squared equals c squared. And you can plug in your x and your y, and you would be able to evaluate those numbers and then take the square root. So c would equal this. So whatever your value of c was, that is your hypotenuse. And I'm just going to call that h for hypotenuse, and that would be your c value. So then to evaluate the trig functions, we'll write those down, the sine of theta, cosine of theta, and the tangent of theta. And we're only going to worry about those three for this lesson. So the sine, remember, SOHCAHTOA, is sine is opposite over hypotenuse. And in this case, the opposite side of theta is y. The adjacent is x. Okay, so using the letters, the sine of theta would be y over h. Cosine is adjacent over hypotenuse, so using the letters that we have labeled there, the adjacent side is x, the hypotenuse is h, and tangent is opposite over adjacent, so that would be y over x. Okay, so if you had numbers, you'd just be plugging in those numbers, but we are going to be using these values now when we work with quadrantals. So whenever you see the opposite, that refers to your y value, and adjacent refers to your x value. So let's go ahead and talk here about the quadrantals. So when we're on the unit circle, what we're going to use for 0 degrees is a point right here. And a unit means 1 unit, so the radius of the circle is 1. So to get to this point, we would go over 1, up 0. So that's the value at 0 degrees. At 90 degrees, the value here, we would go over 0, up 1. At 180 degrees, the value here would be, let's see, we're at 0. We have to go back 1, so negative 1, 0. And at 270 degrees, this coordinate would be over 0, down 1. So now we're going to use what we did up above here to evaluate the trig functions. Now the x, we'll label x and y above each of these. So whenever we're doing a quadrantal, we want to think of the unit circle and then label each quadrant. Next, with those trig functions, we need the hypotenuse. So if we were to do the Pythagorean theorem here, the a and the b would be your x and your y, using what we did last time. So c squared is equal to 1. And when you take the square root, and again, we were talking about distances when we looked at the hypotenuse, so that's always your positive value. So h equals 1. Now when we use 0, 1 right here, the same thing will happen, so h will equal 1. When we use a negative 1 for 180 degrees, here's the thing. If you put in a negative 1 and you square it, it becomes a positive. So you're still going to get h equals 1 for each of these. So what we have to do again is just write down the point, the location, 1, 0, 0, 1, negative 1, 0, and 0, negative 1. Hypotenuse is always 1 for each of these. Now we can evaluate the trig functions, the sine of theta, cosine of theta, and the tangent of theta. Now let's say we want to evaluate the sine of 0. So we'll, instead of theta, we're going to write 0. So the sine of 0 degrees, cosine of 0, and the tangent of 0 degrees. So sine, let's just scroll up here a little bit, is y over h, opposite over hypotenuse, y over h. So just look at your y value here. Your y value at 0 degrees is 0. Your h value at 0 degrees is 1. And 0 divided by 1 is 0. So that's what the value is. Cosine is adjacent over hypotenuse, which is x over h. So looking up above right here, x over h. So your x value is 1. Your h value is 1 also. So sine is 1, or cosine is 1. Tangent is y over x. So then put in your x and your y values. So y is 0, x is 1. So you get 0. So the tangent at 0 degrees is 0. So that's what you do for each of these. We'll do another one here. Let's go ahead and do 270. The sine of 270, cosine of 270, and the tangent of 270. So sine is y over h. So you're going to have to remember because it's opposite, which is your y value, hypotenuse, which is h. So your y value is negative 1. H is 1. So you end up with a negative 1. Cosine is x over h. Your x value at 270 is 0. Your h value is 1. So 0 over 1 is 0. Tangent of 270 would be y over x. So your y value is negative 1. Your x value is 0. Now, remember, we can never divide by 0 in math, so that is undefined. So let's take a look at the worksheet you need to do. Right here, it says evaluate the trig functions of quadrantal angles and convert between radians and degrees. So first, we're just going to do the first part. So the sine of 90. Well, 90 is right here, and we're going to pretend there's a unit circle here. Okay, and that's on that unit circle. So this value right here would be 0, 1. So you write x is 0, y is 1. The hypotenuse is always 1. And now this problem just says the sine. Now sine is opposite over hypotenuse. Remember we said the opposite is a y, the hypotenuse is h. So your y value is 1, your hypotenuse is 1, so your answer is 1. And let's go ahead and do cosine of 180. So we'll put a dot here. This location then is negative 1, 0. That's your x, that's your y. Your hypotenuse equals 1. On every single one of these, hypotenuse is 1. So cosine is adjacent over hypotenuse, and if you'll recall, the adjacent is the x, hypotenuse is h. So your x value is negative 1, your hypotenuse is 1, so your cosine of 180 is a negative 1. All right, and let's just look at one more and then we will be done with this lesson. So let's do the tangent of 360. How about? Well, 360 degrees goes all the way around, so it's right back here. This point is 1, 0. So that's your x, that's your y. Hypotenuse equals 1. So the tangent is y over x. So it'd be 0 over 1, which is 0. All right, that's it. Let me know if you have questions. Thanks for watching.